You've felt it, haven't you? That subtle vibration in the air around you, the sudden quiet that doesn't feel like peace, but like a pause in the universe itself. Something deep inside you has been whispering that heaven just noticed your name, that something unseen has shifted in the higher realms. It's as if the light above has turned and focused directly on you, not to expose you, but to examine what you've carried through the storm. You don't fully understand it, but lately there's been an energy around you that feels both heavy and divine, like the calm before revelation. The truth is, heaven has flagged your name, and though you cannot see it, a divine transaction is under review. Every tear, every moment you chose faith over fear, every lonely night you thought no one witnessed, all of it has been recorded, and now it's being revisited by the higher realms. This is not punishment. It's not rejection. It's a holy audit, a sacred review of everything that has happened to you, everything that was delayed, and everything that was promised. You've been waiting for answers, for movement, for breakthrough, but instead of clarity, you've only been met with silence. That's because heaven doesn't rush reviews. When the divine system pauses, it's not because something's wrong, it's because something major is being processed. You've been feeling it in your body, in your sleep, in your dreams, the sense that the world around you has slowed down. You've been pulled away from people, from distractions, from noise, and you've wondered if it's because you've done something wrong. But no, you've done something right. The isolation was the verification. God doesn't review those who are ordinary. He reviews those whose next assignment is extraordinary. The last few months, or maybe even years, have felt like a spiritual stillness you can't escape from. It's like being trapped in a divine waiting room where time stretches and emotions amplify. The things that used to excite you no longer hold power. The people who once supported you now seem distant or removed. And deep inside, there's been this quiet question echoing. Why is everything stopping right when I was starting to move forward? But the answer is hidden in the timing. Heaven pauses what's in motion when something bigger is coming. It's as if your entire life has been placed on divine hold, not because you failed the test, but because you've reached a checkpoint where everything must be verified. Your motives, your patience, your obedience, your purity of heart, they are all being weighed. In the unseen realms there is movement, review, recalibration. The angels are opening files that carry your name, and they are examining your journey. The nights you didn't give up when you could have. The prayers you whispered when no one heard. The love you showed even after being betrayed. Every act of quiet faith has been stored like currency in the vaults of heaven. And now, heaven is performing the audit. You've felt it in the fatigue, that no rest can heal. You've sensed it in the strange calm that hovers over your chaos. It's not coincidence. It's divine silence, the kind that comes before sudden acceleration. You are not being punished. You're being validated. You are not forgotten. You are being observed. Heaven's systems don't operate by your timeline. They operate by readiness. And when heaven flags a name, it means your identity is being verified against your destiny. Like a transaction pending approval, the system is checking if what you've endured has prepared you for what you've been promised. That's why things have felt suspended. That's why people have been removed. That's why prayers have gone unanswered. You're in the review. This season has been heaven's way of saying, let's make sure the chosen one is ready for what's about to be released. Every moment of your life that felt wasted was secretly a data point in your divine record. Every time you loved, through pain, forgave what broke you, or waited when nothing made sense, you added evidence to your case. Heaven collects that evidence because rewards are not emotional, they're judicial. The kingdom operates on law, balance, and timing. And right now, somewhere beyond your comprehension, your case has been reopened. The silence of God is not the absence of God. It's the courtroom in session. You're not in the dark. You're under divine review. The delay you hate is proof that your destiny has reached heaven's desk. So when everything around you feels frozen, when you feel disconnected and unseen, remember, this stillness is sacred. You are in the pause before movement, in the hush before the trumpet. It's not over. It's under review. And the moment that review completes, the very areas of your life that feel dead will begin to pulse with divine motion again. But first, heaven must confirm your identity, your integrity, and your readiness for the transfer that's coming. Because when heaven flags your name, it's not just for attention, it's for release. You've wondered why it had to feel so personal, why the silence of heaven had to sound like rejection, why the same God who once spoke so loudly now whispers only through absence. The truth is, when heaven begins to review a soul, it does not examine your victories first. It audits your heart. Every chosen one must pass through this invisible evaluation, where motives are stripped bare and truth stands alone. You may have prayed for more, but heaven was not checking what you wanted. It was checking why you wanted it. This is where the divine audit begins. Not with your achievements, but with your intentions. It's the season where everything looks still, yet something holy is unfolding beneath the surface. You're being measured in silence, and every reaction counts. How do you respond when the applause stops? How do you love when there's no reward? How do you hold faith when faith seems to have held you hostage? That's what heaven looks for, because power without purity destroys destiny. You see, heaven has no shortage of promises. It has a shortage of hearts strong enough to hold them without collapsing. So when you found yourself walking through betrayal, loss, disappointment, and uncertainty, those weren't punishments, they were exams. Every storm, every heartbreak, every closed door, it all existed to reveal what was still alive inside you when everything else fell away. Joseph faced that same divine audit, falsely accused, abandoned in a prison cell, years of silence echoing between him and the promise he once received. It wasn't that God forgot him, it was that God was observing him. The prison was heaven's review room. And when Joseph stayed faithful in confinement, heaven declared him ready for the palace. That's what this silence in your life has been. It's heaven quietly evaluating your character when no one's watching. You see, heaven doesn't just test what you do when things go right, it studies how you carry yourself when everything goes wrong. This is the audit of the heart. It examines how you respond when God doesn't respond. It examines whether your worship survives the wilderness. And if you've been feeling stripped, emptied, unseen, it's because heaven has been removing every false motive, every hidden pride, every illusion that your strength came from anything other than grace. This purification hurts because it's thorough. It reaches into memories you thought you'd buried. It brings up the old wounds and forces you to forgive again, not because God wants to reopen your pain, but because He wants your heart free, enough to receive what's coming next. The old you cannot handle the next level of glory. The impatient you, the reactive you, the version of you that sought validation from others. That version had to die in the silence. The new you is emerging in stillness. That's what divine withholding feels like the heavens are closed, but really, heaven is reprogramming your identity. You've been praying for increase, but God has withheld. You've asked for confirmation, but heaven gave you confusion instead. You've wanted movement, but the divine system froze the screen of your life and whispered, "Wait." This is the holy tension between desire and destiny. God's refusal isn't cruelty, it's protection. if he gave you what you asked for, before your soul was aligned, that blessing would become your downfall. The withholding is proof of worth. It's how heaven ensures that when you receive the next season, you won't lose it through immaturity. Israel wandered the desert not because God changed his mind about the promised land, but because the people needed transformation before transition. The wilderness was the audit, the silence between slavery and sovereignty. That's where you are right now. Heaven is recalibrating your system. The dreams that used to excite you feel distant. The relationships that once defined you are fading, and even your prayers sound different. This is what it feels like when heaven shifts you from survival mode to stewardship mode. You can't go back to who you were, because that version of you has been reviewed and retired. And yes, it's lonely. Yes, it's disorienting. You find yourself watching others rise, watching doors open for people who didn't pay the price you did, wondering why heaven seems unfair. But remember, every shortcut leads to short-lived success. Heaven doesn't promote based on public visibility, it promotes based on private integrity. You are being prepared for something you can't yet perceive. The silence is not rejection. It's the sacred construction zone of destiny. You can't hear heaven because heaven is building around you. You're surrounded by scaffolding of divine timing, by unseen angels working overtime to arrange details you won't even recognize until later. Every withheld opportunity, every unanswered prayer, every relationship that dissolved, it's all evidence that heaven is actively protecting your process. And I know you've cried over it. I know there were nights when your pillow became the altar, and you asked, why does it hurt this much if it's supposed to make me holy? Because refinement burns, purification strips. Transformation doesn't come through celebration, it comes through surrender. When heaven withholds, it's not punishing you, it's rewriting your capacity. The version of you that is emerging will look back at this version and say, now I see why God didn't give it to me then. You are not being starved. You are being stored. The blessings are being held in divine escrow until your spirit matures enough to sustain them. God cannot release what your current character cannot carry. That's why everything's slowed down. That's why heaven feels distant. Because this is not a delay, it's an upgrade. The pause is the proof that something enormous is pending, and every day you stay faithful in the dark. Every moment you keep believing even without evidence, your name glows brighter in heaven's system. The angels are taking note. Heaven is whispering, still faithful, still waiting, still trusting. Every tear is currency. Every breath of hope is a deposit. Every yes you whispered in the valley was logged as evidence of readiness. The silence has been the sound of heaven typing your name into eternity's records. And even though you can't see it yet, the system has not failed. It's finalizing. What you call delay is actually divine calculation. The equation of your life is being balanced, the pain multiplied into purpose, the loss converted into legacy. You think you're standing still, but heaven sees motion. You think nothing's happening, but the file of your destiny is open before the throne. Every test, every tear, every lonely night, it's all under review. The withholding is ending. Soon, but before release comes verification, and you are almost through it. Heaven is preparing to move your name from pending to approved. And when that happens, nothing in this world or the next can block what's about to be released into your life. The silence isn't forever, it's just the breath before breakthrough. The review is still ongoing, but the sound you can't. Here is the sound of heaven recalibrating your reality. The file is open. The audit is almost complete. And when it's finished, your story will no longer sound like waiting. It will sound like victory wrapped in divine timing. There comes a moment in every chosen one's life when you begin to realize that what you lost was never random. that every person who left and every opportunity that vanished was part of a divine pattern you could not yet see. You begin to sense that an unseen hand has been moving through your story, rearranging pieces that didn't fit, pulling you out of rooms that would have destroyed your peace, and closing doors that looked perfect but would have poisoned your purpose. This is the hidden hand of recalibration, the silent movement of heaven that works while you grieve. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't explain why it's moving things around. It simply begins to shift your environment so your spirit can breathe again. You might not have recognized it at first. It probably looked like chaos. You called it loss, disappointment, or even betrayal. But heaven called it clearance. Because divine timing is never about convenience. It's about construction. And sometimes before heaven can build something new, it must tear down everything unstable. So, when everything in your life started collapsing at once, relationships ending, finances shaking, health tested, silence growing thicker, it wasn't because you were being punished. It was because heaven was rebuilding you from the foundation up. God saw cracks in the walls that you couldn't see. He heard conversations you weren't meant to hear. He removed people who had already stopped praying for you, even while they smiled at you. The divine hand began pulling back the curtain, removing actors from your stage and allowing truth to surface. You called it exposure, but heaven called it liberation. Because when heaven recalibrates, it never consults your comfort. It only answers to your calling. You see, some of the people who left couldn't go where you're going. They didn't have the spiritual clearance for the next level of your assignment. When heaven flagged your name, access to you became restricted. You became a sacred space under review. It's like heaven whispered to your angels, "Guard the perimeter," and suddenly everything unaligned had to go. You've been wondering why conversations feel different, why you don't connect to old friends anymore, why the people you used to trust feel distant. It's because your frequency changed. When heaven begins upgrading your vibration, the old energy around you can't understand your new silence. Your soul no longer resonates with gossip, small talk, or chaos. You are being recalibrated for higher use, and it hurts. It hurts to be removed from circles that once felt like home. It hurts to realize that the ones you thought would stay forever were only chapters in your training. But remember this, heaven never takes without replacing. Every subtraction in the natural is a multiplication in the spiritual. The isolation was never punishment, it was placement. Just as God pulled Elijah away from the crowd and fed him by ravens, just as David was anointed but then sent back to the wilderness, you too were withdrawn for refinement. There is power in divine solitude. It's in that quiet separation that your discernment sharpens. It's there that heaven rewires your instincts, clears your vision, and detoxes your spirit from the noise of the world. In the waiting room of the anointed, you learn to stop chasing validation and start valuing silence. You learn that not all movement is progress. You learn that sometimes the holiest thing you can do is rest while heaven works. It's strange, isn't it? How everything stops moving right after you finally surrender to your purpose. You expected acceleration, but instead you were sent into stillness. You thought obedience would open every door, but instead it closed them. That's because heaven doesn't test your faith through open doors. It tests it through locked ones. David knew that feeling. After being anointed king, he didn't sit on a throne. He was sent back into obscurity. He faced rejection, exile, and betrayal. Yet, in that wilderness, heaven was shaping him into someone who could carry the weight of a crown. God wasn't slow. He was strengthening David's soul for sovereignty. That's what he's doing with you. You are in that sacred pause where the promise and the palace feel equally distant. It's the space between revelation and realization. And it's here, in the waiting, that heaven does its deepest work. You are learning to trust God, even when you have no evidence that He's still involved. You are learning to believe in destiny, even when everything looks like delay. This is the waiting room of the anointed, the place where miracles are matured. There's no timeline here, no applause, no map, just faith and fire. But don't mistake silence for inactivity. Heaven is still moving, just not where you can see it. The divine review includes not only your heart and your patience, but also your environment. Heaven is reviewing your relationships right now, determining who can walk with you into what's next, and who must exit gracefully before the elevation comes. It hurts because some of these people are good people. They've loved you, helped you, prayed for you. But divine alignment isn't about goodness, it's about assignment. Some people's purpose in your life has expired, and keeping them close out of nostalgia would only delay what's been ordained for you. When heaven flags your name, it triggers a cleansing. Every connection not rooted in truth begins to fall apart. People stop calling, messages slow down, and you feel like you're fading from everyone's memory. But that's the mercy of heaven. God knows what you don't, that some connections cannot survive the level of light you're about to carry. Jesus went through it too. In the Garden of Gethsemane, even His closest disciples fell asleep. He asked them to watch with Him, but they couldn't. It wasn't because they didn't love Him, it was because they weren't spiritually awake enough to handle that level of warfare. The garden exposes who's truly meant to go forward. When you enter your own Gethsemane, those nights where your soul is heavy and heaven is silent, you'll notice people disappearing. Let them. The garden is always crowded at the beginning, but only destiny walks out. Heaven isn't taking people away from you, it's removing access to you. You are sacred now. You are in review. You are being set apart for divine deployment. And when heaven begins reviewing relationships, it doesn't just remove, it replaces. You will start meeting people whose spirit feels familiar, whose presence brings peace, whose energy aligns with your new assignment. These are destiny connections, and they won't demand explanations. They'll recognize your spirit. You won't have to chase them or prove yourself. They'll arrive when heaven approves the transfer. The solitude is temporary. The review is sacred. The recalibration is necessary. You're not being forgotten, you're being filtered. And soon you'll look back on this season and realize that what felt like loss was really protection. What looked like endings were simply edits. And what broke you was actually breaking the chain that once kept you small. Heaven is not silent because you've done something wrong. Heaven is silent because it's rearranging everything you'll need for the next move. You are standing in the in-between, the quiet before the clarity, the loss before the legacy. You are in divine review, and soon, when the review is complete, the very silence that haunted you will become the soundtrack of your elevation. There comes a point where the weight of everything you've endured begins to feel unbearable, where your prayers seem to vanish into the ceiling, and the silence from heaven becomes so loud that it starts to echo inside your chest. You wonder if maybe you missed a sign, if maybe you stayed too long in something that was supposed to end, or if perhaps you've already failed your assignment before it began. But that's not what's happening. What you're experiencing right now is the divine paradox that every chosen soul must face, the valley between the revelation of destiny and the manifestation of it. This is where the currency of suffering comes into play. You see, heaven doesn't deal in comfort, it trades in endurance. Every pain you've survived has spiritual value. Every betrayal, every rejection, every sleepless night has been recorded in the archives of eternity as a deposit toward your future. When you cried and no one heard, heaven did. When you forgave people who didn't apologize, that mercy was converted into spiritual equity. You have been paying for your anointing in a currency that no one else can see. The chosen never buy their way to greatness with talent or charm. They purchase it with pain. It's through that pain that you become fluent in compassion, understanding, and discernment. It's through the breaking that your vision becomes purified. Every time you wanted to quit but didn't, you invested in your future self. Every time you loved again after being betrayed, you expanded your capacity for divine connection. Suffering refines the soul in ways that comfort never can. It teaches you to listen beyond words, to feel beyond appearances, and to trust beyond evidence. It's not random. It's the sacred economics of heaven. What the world calls loss, heaven calls investment. But this is where it gets harder. Because right after your greatest acts of faith, the silence usually grows stronger. That's the test between verification and release. Heaven always verifies before it releases. And that verification doesn't come in the form of blessings. It comes in the form of silence. Think of it like this. Before a plane takes off, there's a period where everything seems to stop. The engines hum, the crew checks every system, and for a brief moment, there's complete stillness. That stillness isn't delay, it's confirmation. The same thing happens with your destiny. Heaven verifies your readiness by testing your endurance in silence. Can you still trust when you can't trace? Can you still believe when you can't hear? Can you still obey when there's no applause? This silence isn't punishment, it's preparation. Heaven is watching how you handle absence, because if you can stay faithful in silence, you can be trusted with sound. Many people fail here. They interpret heaven's quietness as abandonment and begin searching for validation in human voices. But you, the one marked by heaven, are being taught something deeper. How to move by intuition when instruction seems absent. That's the true test of divine maturity. You are being trained to walk by faith and not by familiarity. The silence between verification and release is where heaven watches your reactions more than your prayers. This is where it measures your resilience, your humility, and your obedience. Remember, Jesus too experienced divine silence on the cross. He cried out, "My God, why have you forsaken me?" And heaven said nothing. But even in that silence, redemption was unfolding. Heaven's quietness is never emptiness, it's incubation. You are not forgotten, you are fermenting. Something inside you is ripening, preparing to burst forth at the appointed time. But this in-between stage hurts. The most because you've outgrown the old life, yet the new one hasn't arrived. You're spiritually homeless, suspended between who you were and who you're becoming. You look around and everything feels unfamiliar. Friends changing, priorities shifting, energy fading. It feels like everything stable is dissolving. That's because you are in the midst of an unseen transfer. Heaven is moving resources from the invisible to the visible. Every delay you've endured, every no you've faced, every closed door was actually part of a grand transfer process. The resources meant for your next season are being rerouted. Heaven doesn't just give, it reallocates. There are things that once belonged to others that will now be placed in your hands, not because you are better, but because you are ready. Divine wealth, spiritual, emotional, and material, is shifting from the unfaithful to the prepared. And you, through your patience and obedience, have been marked as ready. The unseen transfer often starts subtly. You may begin to feel random bursts of clarity or sudden creative ideas that seem too big for your current reality. You might find yourself being drawn to new places, new people, or new habits without fully understanding why. That's heaven redirecting your frequency to align with what's coming. You'll notice yourself losing taste for old conversations, losing desire for temporary pleasures, losing the urge to prove yourself. That's not depression, it's elevation. Heaven is upgrading your appetite. Because when you're about to receive something divine, your spirit must first detox from the temporary. So don't panic if you feel empty lately. That emptiness is just space being cleared for new abundance. But here's the paradox. The unseen transfer also includes exposure. Before heaven adds, it reveals. You'll start seeing the truth behind faces, intentions behind words, motives behind kindness. It's unsettling at first. You'll want to go back to ignorance, but you can't. Once heaven opens your eyes, they don't close again. You're being given the gift of divine sight, the ability to perceive truth beyond illusion. And with that comes responsibility. You'll no longer be able to tolerate certain energies or pretend not to notice what's wrong. You'll be called to stand apart, to speak when silence would be easier, to love when bitterness would be safer. This is the price of carrying divine sight. You see everything differently now. You begin to understand that the people who hurt you were often just instruments in your awakening, that the doors that closed were actually exits from false assignments. You stop blaming and start blessing. That's the moment the unseen transfer begins to manifest. Because heaven only trusts abundance to those who no longer idolize it. When your heart no longer craves recognition, heaven gives you influence. When you stop chasing wealth for validation, heaven sends resources freely. When you no longer need control, heaven releases destiny. You're being refined for responsibility. That's why this silence feels so suffocating. It's not emptiness. It's recalibration. Your soul is adjusting to a new frequency, one where blessings flow without noise, one where peace outweighs success, one where purpose replaces pressure. And soon, this silence will break. Not with chaos, but with clarity. The things that once confused you will suddenly make sense. The pain that once haunted you will reveal its purpose. You'll look back and realize that this valley wasn't punishment. It was preservation. Heaven was hiding you from premature exposure. You were never being left behind. You were being left alone so you could catch up spiritually. And when the transfer is complete, when the silence finally lifts, you'll find yourself standing in places you once only dreamed of, surrounded by peace that no applause could ever provide. But before that happens, the last test remains, the test of trust during divine invisibility. When it feels like even heaven is waiting on you to move, will you still choose faith? Because it's in that choice, made in silence, that the final gate opens and the transfer becomes visible. There comes a season, right before the release, when everything feels like it's crumbling. It's not just the silence anymore, it's the dismantling. The very things that once held you together begin to fall apart. Relationships you thought would last forever start fading. The plans you made, the visions you carried so confidently, suddenly seem fragile. You start questioning if you heard God right in the first place. If heaven really flagged my name, you think, then why does everything look like rejection? But what you don't realize is that this dismantling isn't the end, it's the purification before promotion. Heaven is clearing out everything that cannot survive in your next level. The vibration of your old season is too dense for the altitude you're about to rise to. This is why it hurts. You're shedding identities, attachments, and illusions that once gave you stability. It's spiritual turbulence before the flight takes off. Most people panic here, but the chosen ones learn to breathe through it. Because when you start losing things without reason, you're not being punished, you're being lightened. You can't carry the weight of the old world into the promise of the new. The dismantling feels cruel, but it's the mercy of heaven in disguise. God removes what you think you need to show you what you actually carry. Every time something or someone leaves, your spirit expands. Every ending is a disguised graduation. But in the middle of it, it doesn't feel like graduation. It feels like death. That's because it is. The death of control, the death of the timeline you made for yourself, the death of the version of you that thought it had everything figured out. You'll try to save things, to hold on to what once made sense, but heaven will keep shaking the foundations until all that remains is truth. This is the wilderness phase of divine transformation. It's where the false self dies so the true self can emerge. It's where the chosen ones walk alone, guided not by certainty, but by faith. You'll look for answers and find only silence. You'll seek comfort and find only surrender. You'll pray for direction and find yourself led to stillness. It's not that heaven isn't speaking, it's that you're being trained to hear in new frequencies. God doesn't always speak in thunder. Sometimes he whispers through delay. Sometimes he teaches through confusion. Sometimes he blesses through subtraction. This is the paradox that only the awakened understand. Loss is the language of preparation. Every closed door is heaven's way of redirecting traffic. Every delay is divine choreography. Every disappointment is a disguised reroute. You are being moved to alignment, not abandonment. The dismantling is surgical, precise, intentional, necessary. Heaven is removing even good things that could become distractions later. That's why sometimes the loss doesn't even make sense. It's not because you did anything wrong. It's because you've outgrown the environment where that thing once fit. You are expanding beyond recognition. The very frequency of your soul is shifting to something higher, more refined, more aware, more luminous. And while the outside world sees you as isolated or lost, the unseen realm recognizes you as in transit. Heaven has placed a do not disturb sign over your life while the construction takes place. Every storm, every ending, every heartbreak is part of the renovation process. Heaven cannot bless the version of you that refuses to evolve, so it must lovingly destroy the shell you've been hiding in. It's painful, yes, but every tear is cleansing your vision. Every night you cry yourself to sleep is washing away spiritual residue from the old season. You are not breaking down, you are breaking open. There's a difference. You're being prepared to host divine frequency, and that kind of preparation requires emptiness. Because when heaven wants to pour something new, it must first empty the vessel. Don't fight the emptiness. Don't fill it with distractions or noise. Sit in it. Let it hollow you out until all that's left is truth. Because it's in that silence, in that sacred hollow, that the divine download begins. The next version of you is being written there. In the unseen, in the waiting, in the surrender. It's not happening to you, it's happening through you. You are not being stripped, you're being upgraded. But upgrades often feel like loss because they replace what's familiar with what's foreign. Your spirit recognizes the shift, but your mind resists it. That's why the chosen ones feel restless in transition. Their spirit has moved ahead, but their body hasn't caught up yet. This tension is holy. It's the gap between your human timeline and heaven's schedule. You want clarity, but heaven wants trust. You want the plan, but heaven wants surrender. You want to know where it's going, but heaven is more interested in who you're becoming. Because destiny isn't a destination, it's a frequency. And you are being tuned right now to the vibration of your divine assignment. You'll start to notice subtle changes, not in your surroundings, but in your responses. You'll begin to find peace in uncertainty. You'll stop chasing closure and start creating it. You'll stop defending your worth and simply embody it. This is how you know the metamorphosis is taking hold, when stillness becomes strength, not punishment. You start understanding that not every battle needs to be fought. Not every betrayal needs to be confronted. and not every loss needs to be replaced. Because when heaven flags your name, the fight shifts from external to internal. The war becomes about mastery, mastering your emotions, your reactions, your focus. That's how divine authority is built. Before heaven crowns you with influence, it teaches you restraint. It trains you to be still when everything around you screams, "Move." It teaches you to walk in grace when vengeance would feel easier. This restraint is sacred strength. It's not weakness, it's spiritual precision. You are learning how to wield your energy like a sword. You're learning when to speak and when to stay silent, when to fight and when to release, when to act and when to wait. This is the inner training ground of every chosen one, the season where heaven turns pain into power. The dismantling is no longer something happening to you. It becomes something happening for you. You begin to realize that what you lost wasn't yours to begin with, that what left you had to leave to make space for what's arriving. You stop seeing endings as punishment and start seeing them as divine strategy. That's when heaven smiles, because now you're finally getting it. You're no longer reacting, you're responding. You're no longer begging, you're listening. You're no longer waiting for signs. You've become one. This is the quiet revolution taking place in your spirit, the moment you stop chasing destiny and begin embodying it. The dismantling doesn't end when the storm passes. It ends when you realize the storm was never meant to destroy you. It was meant to teach you how to walk on water. And now, as everything in your life seems to unravel, something deeper inside you is coming alive. A steady, unshakable knowing that somehow, despite the chaos, you are exactly where you're meant to be. You can feel heaven's presence in the ache, in the pause, in the stillness. You don't need proof anymore because you've become the evidence. The dismantling is almost complete, and the next phase, the rebuilding, is already on its way. But before heaven rebuilds, it reveals. Before it multiplies, it magnifies. And what comes next is not just restoration, it's revelation. The kind that changes everything you thought you knew about who you are and why heaven chose you. There is a strange quiet that follows the storm. It's not the silence of absence, but the silence of completion, like the stillness that hangs in the air after thunder has rolled away. You begin to notice it slowly. The chaos that once surrounded you starts to lose its grip. The urgency to fix, to chase, to prove, it fades. Something in you softens. You wake up one morning and realize you're not fighting anymore. The battles that used to consume your energy now feel irrelevant. You're not numb, you're just anchored. The world hasn't stopped spinning, but you have stopped reacting to every tremor. This is the beginning of your restoration. It doesn't come with fireworks or sudden breakthroughs, but with subtle shifts that only the sensitive can feel. It's in the way you breathe deeper now. It's in the way you can stand in uncertainty without losing your peace. Heaven hasn't just been changing your circumstances. It's been changing your chemistry. You've been recalibrated to peace. Not the kind that depends on things going right, but the kind that stays even when nothing makes sense. This peace isn't fragile. It's forged. It was born in the fire of every heartbreak you survived. In every season of silence you endured. You no longer need closure from people or outcomes. You've found it in God's timing. That's the difference between the old you and the one emerging now. The old you needed validation. The new you carries confirmation. The old you feared rejection. The new you understands redirection. The old you begged for open doors. The new you trusts the ones that close. Heaven's flag over your life isn't just approval, it's ownership. You belong to a frequency that no longer aligns with chaos. And because of that, you'll start noticing that your environment begins to rearrange itself around your new energy. People who can't meet you in truth will quietly drift away. Opportunities that don't match your purpose will dissolve. Don't mourn it. It's divine filtration. Heaven is curating your surroundings for where you're going next. You've passed the stage of emotional reaction. Now you're entering spiritual precision. You'll begin to sense what's for you long before it arrives. Your spirit has been trained to read the energy of things. You'll feel peace when something is right and heaviness when it's not. That discernment isn't anxiety. It's heaven's language. You've learned to interpret it through pain, and now it becomes your compass. This is how heaven communicates with those it trusts, not through constant miracles, but through resonance. You've been tuned to divine frequency. When you walk into a place and feel peace, that's heaven whispering, "Stay." When you feel resistance or confusion, that's heaven saying, "Move." You no longer need signs and wonders because your entire being has become one. You've become a living prophecy, walking confirmation of heaven's reality on earth. And yet, even here, there's another layer. The restoration isn't just internal, it's also external. Slowly, things begin to return to you, but not in the same form. The relationships that left may not come back, but you'll find connections that feel like home. The money you lost may not return through the same channel, but abundance will start flowing in new ways that surprise you. The peace you prayed for will manifest not as escape from problems, but as authority over them. This is the true mark of restoration. You don't just get back what was taken, you receive understanding that transcends loss. Heaven doesn't restore to the same state. It upgrades. When Job's story turned, he didn't just receive double his possessions, he received revelation. He saw God differently, and therefore saw himself differently. That's what's happening to you now. Heaven is rewriting your understanding of abundance. It's no longer about accumulation, it's about alignment. The divine transaction is complete. What was under review is now being released. But heaven won't drop it all at once. It releases in rhythm with your readiness. That's why blessings seem to appear in layers. A new door opens, then another, then another. Each door reveals a version of you that had to be hidden until now. Every blessing becomes both a reward and a responsibility. You'll notice that as heaven restores you, it also expands you. You'll find yourself carrying peace into rooms filled with tension, hope into places of despair, love into spaces filled with judgment. You'll start noticing people drawn to your presence without knowing why. It's because your energy now carries divine resonance. You've become a transmitter of heaven's frequency. That's why the tests had to be so intense, because what you carry now is not ordinary. You had to be crushed to become this pure. You had to lose your own rhythm to learn heaven's. You had to walk through the wilderness to learn how to guide others out of theirs. That's what being chosen means. You are the blueprint others will one day follow. Your life becomes a living testimony of divine timing, divine correction, divine restoration. And yet, there's something else heaven is doing quietly behind the scenes. It's restoring your confidence, not the kind built on achievement, but the kind rooted in identity. You begin to realize that you were never waiting for the world to recognize you. You were waiting to recognize yourself. Every trial, every silence, every heartbreak was sculpting you into someone who finally sees their worth without needing applause. That's when you start moving differently, not in arrogance, but in quiet certainty. You stop negotiating your peace for acceptance. You stop shrinking to fit small spaces. You stop chasing approval from those who were never assigned to understand you. You start walking with purpose again, not because everything is perfect, but because you've remembered who you are. Heaven flagged your name because you were never meant to blend in. You were meant to carry light into places that forgot what light felt like. Your survival wasn't random. It was rehearsal. Every time you almost gave up, heaven marked that moment as evidence of readiness. You endured the refining, and now the revealing begins. You'll notice people who once overlooked you suddenly drawn to your wisdom. Situations that once drained you will now align with ease. What was withheld is now being handed to you, not because you demanded it, but because you became it. You no longer chase what's yours. It finds you. That's the frequency of divine alignment. That's the rhythm of heaven's justice. The divine transaction that was once under review has cleared, and your account, spiritual and otherwise, is being credited. But this time, it's not for your comfort. It's for your calling. Heaven never blesses just to bless. It blesses to build. Every resource being released now carries an assignment. The influence you're stepping into will not just elevate you, it will awaken others. You'll start to sense it. Conversations that plant seeds of remembrance in others, words you speak that echo beyond the moment, moments of synchronicity that remind you that nothing is coincidence. You'll start realizing that restoration wasn't the end goal, it was the setup for impact. Everything you went through was never about what you lost. It was about who you were becoming. You were being made into someone unshakable, someone who can stand in truth no matter the cost. Heaven has now completed the interior work, and the exterior manifestation is beginning to unfold. The same people who doubted your silence will witness your elevation. The same ones who questioned your stillness will see the fruit of your patience. Not out of revenge, but out of revelation. That divine timing is real, that heaven truly remembers its own. You'll begin to live in a new rhythm, not rushed, not reactive, but radiant. Because now, you're no longer surviving seasons, you're mastering them. You've become fluent in the language of waiting, loss, and resurrection. You no longer panic when things shift because you know every ending carries encoded beginnings. You trust the unseen now more than ever, and that's what makes you unstoppable. The restoration season is not a finish line, it's a new beginning dressed as peace. And as this peace deepens, heaven begins whispering something new. A calling greater than survival, a purpose larger than comfort. You can feel it forming in your spirit even now. The call to step into your divine assignment with authority, humility, and power. Something in the air changes and you know the time for hiding has ended. The world is about to see what heaven has been building in silence. You can feel it now, can't you? The shift in the atmosphere, that subtle electric pull that tells you heaven is no longer whispering, it's moving. The air feels charged, almost heavy with destiny. It's like standing at the edge of something vast, knowing the next step will change everything. You've waited for this, prayed for this, cried for this, and yet now that it's here, there's a trembling in your spirit, a holy fear mixed with anticipation, because deep down you understand. What's coming isn't just a blessing, it's a becoming. You're not being handed something, you're being revealed as something. The divine transaction that's been under review is no longer pending. Heaven's seal of approval has been released and the spiritual gates are opening. But this moment of release doesn't look like you imagined. It's quieter, more sacred. There's no grand announcement, no trumpet sound, only a deep inner, knowing that something irreversible has shifted. You begin to notice opportunities aligning effortlessly, doors that once mocked you now opening with ease. Conversations that seemed random carry prophetic weight. The right people begin to appear not because you searched, but because you vibrate at the frequency of your next assignment. You are no longer chasing alignment, you are alignment. The divine flow begins to move through your life like a river that has been waiting for the dam to break. Everything that was blocked now begins to pour forth. But even in the outpouring, there is a warning written in the wind: stay anchored. because divine elevation without grounded humility can lead to spiritual collapse. Heaven lifts you not to inflate you, but to position you. This is why your wilderness season was so long. It built the foundation for the weight of what's now being placed upon you. You are being entrusted with more influence, more vision, more spiritual authority, but not for ego, for impact. The platform heaven gives you now is sacred territory. Every word you speak will carry power because it's been forged in silence. Every step you take will create ripples because your path has been purified through pain. The chosen ones don't lead by charisma, they lead by energy. It's not about how loud you are, it's about how true you are. Truth carries its own gravity. It pulls the lost, the broken, the searching toward it without needing to convince. That's your new mantle, to become living truth in motion. You are no longer just a receiver of divine messages. You are a messenger embodied. Heaven will begin to use your life as a broadcast frequency. Every act of kindness will echo in eternity. Every word of encouragement will shift timelines for others. Every time you choose grace over bitterness, heaven will expand your territory. This is the mystery of divine stewardship. The more light you carry, the more weight you must bear. That's why humility is no longer optional, it's protection. The same power that lifts can also crush if not held with reverence. You'll feel this responsibility as a new kind of pressure, not anxiety, but awareness. A knowing that everything you do now matters. The way you think, the way you respond, the way you show up, all of it has spiritual consequence. You've been entrusted with influence, and influence is sacred. This is the moment where heaven's favor becomes visible, but it's not meant to make you comfortable, it's meant to make you capable. You will be sent into environments that once intimidated you, and this time you'll walk in with quiet authority. You'll meet people who once would have overlooked you, but now they'll sense something different, a gravity they can't explain. That's divine recognition. Heaven has stamped your frequency, and the world subconsciously knows it. This is the moment when what was hidden in obscurity becomes undeniable in clarity. But as you rise, distractions will also rise to meet you. The enemy doesn't fight what's stagnant, it fights what's shifting. Suddenly, you'll face new temptations, the urge to prove, to control, to rush. Remember what silence taught you, that divine timing is never late. Resist the temptation to force what heaven is already forming, the same faith that sustained. You in obscurity must now anchor you in visibility. You don't need to announce what heaven has already revealed. Let your fruit speak. Let your peace testify. Let your transformation become your sermon. The chosen ones don't argue, they demonstrate. Your mere presence in certain spaces will speak volumes without a single word. You'll notice people either drawn to your light or repelled by it. Don't take it personally. Divine frequency exposes what cannot align. When heaven flags your name, it also filters your surroundings. Every elevation comes with separation. You cannot carry everyone into your next dimension, not because they're bad, but because their capacity was never meant for this altitude. Let go with love. Release without resentment. Those who are meant to walk with you will catch up when their frequency matches yours. Until then, walk alone if you must, but never shrink again. You've already been through the isolation that prepared you for this visibility. You've already faced the silence that built your discernment. You've already endured the pruning that made room for new fruit. So now, when heaven says move, move without hesitation. You'll start to notice divine synchronicities multiplying. Ideas that once felt too big will suddenly have blueprints. Resources you couldn't find will appear. Conversations will unfold exactly when you need them. This isn't luck, it's alignment. You are walking in the current of divine flow. Every step now is guided, every delay strategic, every connection meaningful. But this is also where your awareness must deepen, because the higher you rise, the more subtle the tests become. Pride won't come at you as arrogance anymore. It'll come disguised as overconfidence in your own discernment. Fear won't appear as panic. It'll hide behind perfectionism. The enemy won't attack your faith directly. It'll distract you with opportunities that seem good but aren't God. This is where wisdom must lead. Every decision now must pass through the filter of peace. If it doesn't bring peace, it's not yours. If it drains you instead of expanding you, it's not aligned. Heaven's rhythm is never forced, it flows. You've learned this rhythm through every storm you survived. You know now that peace isn't the absence of conflict, it's the presence of alignment. That's your compass in this new season. When something aligns, you'll feel your spirit expand. When it's not meant for you, you'll feel contraction. Listen to that. It's heaven's language speaking through your body. You've become fluent in it now, and as you move deeper into this assignment, something miraculous begins to happen. You start recognizing yourself in heaven's reflection. You realize you're no longer the person who once begged for signs. You've become the sign, the evidence of divine timing, of endurance, of faithfulness. You embody the truth that silence was never absence, delay was never denial, and pain was never wasted. You've become living proof that heaven finishes what it starts. The world will see your fruit, but only heaven knows the depth of your roots. And that's what makes your story so powerful. You didn't just survive, you transformed. You didn't just wait, you grew. You didn't just believe, you became. This is the true definition of divine promotion. When your identity aligns so perfectly with heaven's intention that you no longer need validation to move forward. You are no longer waiting for permission, you are walking in purpose. Heaven has reviewed your file, verified your faith, and cleared your release. The stamp of divine approval is not external, it's energetic. You'll feel it in the way the right doors swing open and wrong ones close without struggle. You'll feel it in the way peace leads you into every new assignment. You'll feel it in the way heaven now moves through you effortlessly, without resistance. You've entered the season of flow, and it's not temporary. It's your new normal. But even in this flow, one last revelation remains. The reason you went through it all. And that truth, when it finally hits, won't just explain your past. It will ignite your future. And then, almost suddenly, yet somehow in perfect rhythm, the realization begins to unfold like light breaking through the last layer of fog. Everything you went through was never about loss, delay, or punishment. It was about preparation. Every silent night was heaven reshaping your vision. Every unanswered prayer was the divine rearranging your timeline so that when the doors opened, you would walk through them as the person ready to hold what you once could only dream of. You start to understand that destiny doesn't just hand you blessings. It builds you into the vessel capable of sustaining them. All those times you thought you were forgotten, you were actually being refined. The moments when nothing made sense were the exact moments heaven was aligning the unseen. That's why certain chapters had to close abruptly, why people walked away without explanation, why you felt isolated even when surrounded by others. Because the divine wasn't punishing you, it was preserving you. It was hiding you from premature exposure, protecting you from environments that couldn't nourish your purpose, keeping you out of reach until your spirit was strong enough to carry the light without letting it destroy you. And now, standing in the aftermath of your becoming, you realize that everything you lost was never a loss. It was a trade. You traded comfort for clarity. You traded popularity for purpose. You traded temporary satisfaction for eternal significance. You traded being understood by the world for being chosen by heaven, and that trade was worth everything. The world may never understand the price of your awakening, but heaven does. And that's why the favor on your life will make no logical sense to others. It's not supposed to. It's divine arithmetic, the kind of multiplication that only happens after subtraction. You can feel it now in your bones, a deep stillness that isn't emptiness but completion. The silence that once haunted you now feels sacred. The solitude that once broke you now feels holy. The same storms that tried to bury you have become the water that now makes you bloom. You are walking in the paradox of divine timing, where endings and beginnings are the same breath. And in that breath, something sacred awakens within you. Gratitude. Not the surface kind that comes when things go right, but the soul-deep gratitude that comes when you realize even the wrongs were right in disguise. You start thanking heaven for what didn't work out, for what left, for what never responded. You thank the silence for teaching you discernment. You thank the waiting for building your patience. You thank the heartbreak for expanding your compassion. Every wound you carry now glows with divine purpose. It no longer hurts. It teaches. Every scar tells a story of survival turned into wisdom. You begin to see your whole life as a divine manuscript, every chapter intentional, every detour divine. The handwriting of heaven is all over your timeline, and when you look back now, the pain doesn't bring tears, it brings awe, because you can see it clearly. You were never abandoned, you were always accompanied. Even in the moments when you couldn't feel the divine was shaping you from within. Every breakdown was a coded breakthrough. Every rejection was divine redirection. Every silence was spiritual instruction. You were never waiting for heaven. Heaven was waiting for you to become ready to receive what it had already prepared. And now you are ready. The alignment is complete. The version of you that was required for this moment has fully emerged. You are no longer chasing purpose. You are purpose. You are no longer searching for light. You carry it. You are no longer asking for signs. You are the sign. The same energy that once sought validation now radiates assurance. You know who you are because you finally know whose you are. There's a divine calm that settles over you, not because the journey is over, but because you finally understand that the journey itself is the destination. Every lesson, every delay, every heartbreak was heaven sculpting you into someone who could stand firm in purpose, love deeply without losing self, and walk boldly without needing applause. You no longer crave clarity about what's next, because you trust the one who leads. That's the true power of awakening, not knowing what's coming, but being unshaken when it arrives. You walk now with quiet authority, with peace that doesn't depend on outcomes, with faith that no longer wavers under pressure. You've graduated from needing proof to being the proof. The divine no longer speaks to you in riddles, it speaks through you in resonance. You've become an instrument of higher frequency, carrying a vibration that heals, awakens, and restores. And everywhere you go, this energy goes with you. You begin to notice how people respond differently in your presence, not because you're superior, but because your energy reminds their soul of home. You are no longer here to convince, you are here to embody. The mission now is not to preach light, but to be it. Your existence itself becomes a prophecy fulfilled. You are the living echo of everything heaven has ever whispered into existence. You are the reminder that endurance births excellence, that silence births clarity, that pain births power. This is what it means to be chosen, not to be elevated above others, but to be refined for others. You were not chosen for comfort, you were chosen for impact. And the world is waiting for the sound of your becoming. There are people you haven't met yet, whose healing depends on your obedience. There are souls waiting for the frequency you carry, waiting for your voice, your presence, your truth. You are no longer walking for yourself. You are walking as a bridge between heaven and earth. Your words will carry weight because they've been baptized in tears. Your presence will command peace because it's been tempered by chaos. Your love will feel sacred because it's been purified by loss. This is the full circle moment where everything that broke you now builds others. You are the proof that resurrection isn't just a story, it's a state of being. You are walking evidence that light always finds its way through the cracks. The divine didn't bring you this far to merely survive, it brought you here to shine. You've been prepared to lead, to guide, to illuminate. Not with perfection, but with authenticity. Not with ego, but with empathy. The world doesn't need more noise. It needs more truth. And your truth has been forged in the fire of endurance. That's why your words will penetrate where others echo. That's why your silence will speak louder than shouts. You've become heaven's frequency in human form. Every step you take from here will carry divine orchestration. Every move will be magnetized by purpose. You'll start to witness how easily life aligns when you stop fighting the current and start flowing with it. The miracles that once required striving will now arrive naturally because you've stepped into divine flow. This is the reward of surrender, when effort transforms into effortless manifestation. You'll no longer wonder if you're on the right path, because the path will unfold beneath your feet as you walk. You've entered the season where heaven trusts you with visibility because you no longer need it. You're no longer striving for destiny, you've become a living extension of it. And as you look around, you realize something profound. The light you were chasing was never out there. It was always inside you, waiting for permission to shine. And now, finally, it does. The shadows that once scared you now bow to your glow. The pain that once defined you now bows to your peace. You've arrived, not at the end, but at the beginning of everything you were always meant to be. You are not who you were. You are not even who you became. You are who heaven always knew you were, a vessel of divine fire, a carrier of eternal light, a living testimony that faith transforms everything it touches. So now, walk boldly, speak truthfully, love deeply, shine freely, because the world needs the light you almost buried. Heaven has completed what it started, and now it's your turn to continue the story. You are the chosen one, not because you sought it, but because you surrendered to it. And as you take your next breath, remember, this is not the end of your journey. This is the awakening of your divine era.